I have been a Christian virtually all of my life, since I was a child. And as I grew up, I really grew to be committed to the Lord. I became a believer when I was about 5 years old. And when I was 12 years old, I made a real commitment of my total life to Christ. I knew I was already a believer, but I made the decision that He would really be the Lord of my life. And from that point on, I wanted to do whatever He wanted me to do. And so when I went to church, I listened to what I was told to do. I had great Sunday school teachers. I had people who cared for me. Gradually, I grew to the point where I started to read the Bible through one of my Sunday school teachers, and then eventually I really began to listen to the messages and took a lot of notes, and I was pretty serious about my faith. And one of the conclusions I came to, and I think I was given this as part of my growing up experiences, was that I could do what the Lord wanted me to do. For one thing, I was taught that there were certain things we should do, certain things we shouldn't do. I was given a list of these things, and you know, a lot of the things that were on that list were not bad things to avoid. I mean, never smoking and never drinking, not getting drunk. Those are two really good things to avoid. And not going to a lot of movies. We had Christian movies, so I used to go to the movies, but just a radically different kind of experience. And there were a lot of movies I didn't see, and probably as a young guy was better off not seeing them. But I made a serious mistake as a result of that teaching. I don't know if those who love me wanted me to draw this conclusion. I can't say for sure. I do know they loved me, and they wanted me to walk with the Lord. That I do know. But I made a serious mistake. I concluded that my obedience pleased God, that I could obey, that I could do what God wanted me to do. If He gave me a command, I could do it. Now, it never entered my mind that I was totally inadequate to do what the Lord wanted me to do. Of course, I knew the story of the feeding of the 5,000, but I didn't get the point. I just knew He fed 5,000. That was probably pretty good. It was a great Sunday school story. I don't know that I necessarily saw a connection between what He did with His disciples and what I was supposed to do with my life, but I knew the Lord could do great things. That much I did know. It never occurred to me that I couldn't do what the Lord wanted me to do. After all, I was keeping all of His commandments. What was so hard about being obedient? Well, nothing hard for me not to smoke. I never smoked, so I didn't have any inclination to do it, nor to drink, because I never had any inclination to do it. And you know, there were other things I couldn't do. I'll tell you one thing I could do, and that was go to baseball games. And I loved, in Philadelphia, I loved the Phillies. I went to baseball games, and I had a good time, and I had a good life, and I had good friends, and it was okay. Now, if you would have asked me how I was doing with obeying the Lord, I would have said just fine. And I would have been absolutely sincere. I would truly have believed it was true. I had no sense of need for God's grace. I didn't really know what grace was. I didn't comprehend it. And I lived that way actually I lived that way well into my 30s, until I hit a wall and until I felt that I had failed God. And it was then when I expected Him to fire me. I thought He was done with me. It was then that I realized my need for grace. Now, one of the most amazing things was this. I thought God would fire me because I would fire me. I'd gone out, spent money. My church had funded this trip I mentioned earlier in this series to the Philippines. So I felt like, well, they'd spent the money and I had somehow gone out and I didn't misuse the money. We only spent it on what I was supposed to spend it on. That wasn't the problem, but I had failed. I wasn't the best preacher in the crowd. Who was? What difference did it make? Made all the difference in the world to me. But then I discovered the most amazing thing. God wasn't done with me when I failed him. He wasn't going to fire me. He wasn't going to quit on me. In fact, what is most startling of all is that he began to give me opportunities I never realized I would ever have. He allowed me to become involved in aspects of international ministry that have continued right to this very day. I had no idea when I failed that he would come along and he would bless me. I thought to be blessed, I had to succeed. But that's not the way he approached it. He poured out grace upon what I perceived to be my failure. Now, I have to tell you, I don't think I failed today. Looking back on it, who cares whether I was the best? Why was that important? It was important only to me. It wasn't important to anybody else. It wasn't edifying, it wasn't beneficial. It just drove me and drove me and drove me. What I did not understand was this. God intended to redeem my inadequacy and fill me with his adequacy. His adequacy. He would redeem my inadequacy and fill me with his adequacy. He would give me his resources. He would take my puny resources. I don't think I even had 5 loaves and 2 fish, but he would take what I had and he would redeem it, and he would run it through his capacity, and he would give it back to me and multiply it, and he would use me when I never expected to be used. And you know how he did it? Basically, he tore down all my efforts and he began to rebuild what I was erecting. But there was a difference. The mortar that held my efforts together was my energy, my strength, my resources, my very efforts. When God rebuilt the temple that I was trying to build, the mortar he used was the mortar of his grace. Along the way, I've had to face some hard things about myself. I've had to learn some things about, at times, a competitive spirit and a prideful heart and covetous attitude, personal ambition. I've had to learn a lot of things. And it's hard to say these things about myself. I don't like saying them. But what I know is this. The Lord gave me gifts that he intended to use. And he has used me despite these issues in my life. And he has taken that temple, that life that I was building, and he tore it down. And then he began to rebuild. And he filled my life with his grace. And I can tell you that my life is held together today. Not by my resources, not by my power, not by my energy, but by his grace.